I'm Charlie Bright with Gold Derby, and I am speaking with Elena Fortes, the producer of the Netflix documentary A Cop Movie, for this Behind the Lens Meet the Experts panel. First question I wanted to ask about this movie is the structure of this movie is very intense, and I was curious. Where did the idea for the structure of this documentary come from?
I'll try to say it in a way that doesn't give out too much because that's part of the experience of watching the film. But it was a very collaborative project. Daniela and I come from the documentary world, and Alonso had worked in fiction before and theater. And we knew that we wanted to work together. And the first kind of driving point was making something that would explain to ourselves the impunity crisis in Mexico in the justice system. So basically, the film is the story of two Mexico City police officers, how they enter the system and what happens. And there's a love story between them. And then we have two actors that, in order to interpret the police officers, were infiltrated in police academies and patrolled the streets and spent just a long time with police officers. So the film combines both experiences. And I guess we wanted the journey of the filmmaking process itself and the journey of the actors in this immersive process to somehow reflect our own journey in understanding why that, especially the relationship between citizens and police officers, is so broken. And, it's broken pretty much everywhere for different reasons. But that was, I guess, the driving point for the structure, is making that kind of multi-layered experience happen for everyone, in the process of making the film and in the process of watching the film.
Where did Alonso, the director of the film, get the idea to do a documentary about the police department in Mexico City?
So we basically had a 2-year research period where we interviewed just a bunch of people working within the justice system. And originally we wanted to follow a case through kind of like a public prosecuting office, but that had no cinematic potential. And eventually, we started just talking to and interviewing a lot of police officers and experts that have worked with the police. And cops. The cop movie genre, is very, there was a lot of potential there to play around also with the genre and with the audience expectations. So we decided to focus on cops, and also because they are kind of like our first point of entry into this very dysfunctional system. So it was it was kind of like a huge challenge for everyone involved. And in a way, we felt that we were all jumping into a void making this film that could have been a massive failure. But on the other hand, it just presented so many, creative challenges in how we were going to combine fiction and documentary, and playing around with cop movie, playing around with audience expectations, but also doing something that could have an impact.
What was the casting process like in trying to find the people to play Teresa and Montoya?
It wasn't that long. It was, Raul is actually part of Alonso's theater company, so he had worked with him a lot. And Monica is an actress that, all her work is characterized by being extremely immersive. So they were both used to these experiences, and they are very brave actors. And so that didn't take long. I'm still awestruck by what they had to go through in order to interpret these characters, because there were many risks involved in the process. But I think once there's also a play between performance in the film. At some point we realize police officers are really performing a role that they're not necessarily either prepared or have any training to perform. They're pretending to be kind of these very strong authority figures, and in reality they aren't. So that idea kind of just became woven into the process. So we had two theater actors to play the main roles, but we also had a troupe of actors that would play different roles in the film. And so, I think the fact that they come both from theater and from a very kind of method experience was key in selecting them to play these characters.
Was there ever any concern or worry that audiences might get a bit confused with the narrative structure, going back to what you were talking about with the narrative structure of how the story was being told?
No, I mean, because we wanted that to happen in a way. I mean, as long as we were also being kind of, giving the viewer the elements to figure out the puzzle, was important, and also being truthful to the story and to our, and to our real life subjects throughout. And it's funny that you ask, because we've had, in sort of the times we've screened the film, especially in the US, a lot of questions like, well, what are the documentary aspects of it, and what are the fictional aspects of it? And there are sometimes when they're blurred, and that creates even more interesting situations as well. But I think we just were part of a panel, New Directions in Documentary. And I think what's interesting to me is how the entire kind of award system and industry is structured around very strict categories. So you have to kind of fit in your film in these. And when, we kept asking ourselves, why can't the film just be a film? There is definitely an ethical responsibility that we are more used to in documentary, and that we respected throughout the process. But yeah, that's an interesting question.
It's interesting that I'm guessing you've been making this movie for a while, and here in America, for the past year and a half, it feels like we've been facing a reckoning about everything that comes about how we deal with policing and what policing means in our society. And how do you think that that the film, even though it takes place in another country, do you think that speaks to some of the stuff that's going on right now here in America?
I mean, to a certain extent, yes, even though the context is different. But I think, for us, it was also a challenge, given their kind of police brutality past and human rights violations that are, we had our own George Floyd happen during the process of making the film. But I think it's always a challenge to humanize, perpetrators, or sort of the figure we see as the other, the evil, the bad. And it was really interesting because in a way, someone said at a screening, that's what a defunded police looks like, because that's a particular situation of our own police force. And the other thing that was really interesting to me is that in Mexico, it's almost like racism playing in the inverse. Police in Mexico are mostly come from indigenous communities. They are basically used as bait, thrown out to combat, the drug cartels. So that was really interesting. I think there are many, many differences, but I do think that there is definitely a broken relationship between police or authorities and citizens in many, many places around the world. And, it raises questions that we ask ourselves when viewing the film from that perspective, from the perspective of, the citizens.
So I know the film just got released on Netflix, but since you completed filming, do you know if there have been any noticeable reforms in the police department in Mexico City, or if there have been any serious attempts at trying to get some sort of reform in the organization there?
There was a reform a while back, I think it was 2012. But this is a project that we conceived as a film and accompanied by an impact campaign. So the film just very recently premiered in Mexico as well. It premiered the Thursday before the release on Netflix, and we're doing screenings with police officers, with some of kind of the heads of security and state security heads, and then also community screenings, and we have an educational guide. So we're trying to kind of revive that discussion and working with a lot of organizations that have been working on reforming the police for at least 3 years. So yeah, I mean, the film is just meant to kind of, I guess, board that discussion from a different angle, and involve viewers, also in their responsibility in this dysfunctionality.
You said that you've had screenings with several police officers. What has their reaction been to this film?
It's funny because if some viewers think that the film kind of paints the police in a very positive light, and police officers think it paints them in a very negative light. So I mean, that to me was a good indicator that it's definitely balanced in a way, because that was one of the challenges that we were worried about, just not being kind of apologetic or overly critical, but being kind of more as truthful as we could be. But yeah, so far they say that they love the film, but that they wish that we would tell like other stories, like the positive stories. But that's something that that then becomes part of something else. I think becomes part of the conversation and the campaign. And that's also we did that screening in the office of a major newspaper in Mexico, and the newspaper committed to telling those stories, sending their journalists to spend 24 hours with the police, and so it's exciting. It's an exciting time now, because it's just being kind of it's discovering its path also here in where we wanted the film to have the most impact.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to having you join us back for our group panel in just a little bit.
Thank you, Charlie.